just so that everyone is aware, we're being recorded as of now. I have to be careful now what I say. So yeah, just so everyone is aware who we are. So in total, you will have 3 presenters here today, my colleagues Andreas Weiß, Hauke Timmermann, and myself. And we are all representing the ECO Association of the Internet Industry, as you can see from my background as well. So we represent over 1,000 companies that have something to do with the internet industry, and have been a very active trade association in this field in Germany since the early 1990s. So naturally, we were one of the first people that the German government thought could be, well suited to coordinate a project for the uptake of the next level, maybe, of the internet, which is federated ecosystems for data and infrastructure. And that is the context of the Gaia-X project. So today, when you read GXFS team, that means that as ECO, we are coordinating one of the many projects in the Gaia-X ecosystem, which is GXFS. And then also our colleague Hauke here was in charge of or is still in charge of the ServiceMeister project, which is one of the use cases of a federated ecosystem as well, based on Gaia-X principles. And he will explain to you this use case later on, as it's a very feasible, tangible example of what you can do with Gaia-X. But first, Miriam, we can go to the next slide and have a quick look at what we're going to cover today. So first of all, I will give you an introduction to Gaia-X in general, and then the Gaia-X Federation Services, what that is exactly, you will learn. Then afterwards, Andreas Weiß will dive into the so-called XFSC toolbox with you and give some insights into what federation services specifically are available at a more technical level. And then we will hear from our colleague Hauke about the ServiceMeister project as a case study. And last but not least, we will of course also encourage you all to ask questions and discuss and maybe give some input as well after the presentation. So let's get started with the first topic. First, I think it's always important, we can go directly to the next slide, thank you. First, it's always important to ask ourselves the questions, why do we even need Gaia-X and what is it? So many of you are probably aware that currently the European and the global cloud market is dominated by a few very large platforms, and not by a decentralized system. So the European cloud providers are trying to, with Gaia-X, offer some basic services, I think we have an auto forward in the slides here. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, I'll have to go very quick then. So basically, in a nutshell, Gaia-X is meant to help the European cloud industry become sovereign, so less dependent on individual cloud offerings from major platforms. Then also to pursue a decentralized approach. That means we're no longer looking at one central provider of cloud services, but many small ones can share services and offers. We hope that this will increase the competitiveness of the cloud sector in Europe, and of course this will lead to innovation. So that means we will have new innovative business models that are based on this increased sharing of data. And Gaia-X, of course, offers, to achieve this, open technology approaches. That means everything that is done in Gaia-X is based on open source principles. We are setting minimum requirements for interoperability, and we are setting standardized rules for standardized compliance assessments. And all of this is accompanied also by sovereign identity and trust mechanisms. For all of these points, Andreas Weiß will give you insights in a minute into what exactly that means. So next up, let's look at the idea of a federation. And this is a very important point, actually. So the question is, many small companies, or let's say medium-sized companies from different European countries that are working in one industry, how can they possibly work together then when maybe they are even competitors, So the idea of the federation is that many different industry organizations, but also, maybe individuals or maybe even academia or NGOs can cooperate in the framework of a so-called federation. And they do this by having joint rules and by having communication at eye level. So that means that there are certain rules that a federation sets for itself. And as long as someone complies by these rules or fulfills certain minimum standards, then this organization can join, or this individual can join a federation. And in order to have someone who can set up the federation, we will have a federator appointed who is in charge of the operational startup or setup of a federation. And in order to have this framework, you can use, for example, the GXFS services to ensure basic interoperability. And of course, you may wonder, like, what do we even need a federation for? Maybe one slide back, please. What do we even need the federation for? Of course, today you can already share data by sending maybe an email, or if the file is too large, you could send a link for a download to certain data. But as soon as we look into, industrial data, or then we reach sizes and volumes of data that are unprecedented and that can be expected to grow significantly in the next 10, 20 years, of course. So this is important to understand, that the idea of Gaia-X is not to, have a file share basically in the style of Dropbox or G Drive, but that we are really talking about more structural real-time data sharing, but also to be able to find data and service offerings of other people within a federation. And I think Andreas can explain a bit more about this in a minute. So if you want to have a look and see some of the videos that explain this in a bit, in a bit more detail, but also in a way that we hope it is understandable for a non-technical audience, then you can scan the QR code here and have a look at the different explainer videos that we have been producing over the last 2 years. And of course, these slides will be shared afterwards. So if you are not fast enough now to open the link, you can, of course, have a look later as well. So now we can move to the next slide, please, Miriam. So the question is, now we've heard what a federation is, we know what Gaia-X is, but now what are the Gaia-X Federation Services, GXFS for short. So now we have an auto forward in there again. Sorry about that. So the Gaia-X Federation Services is basically a project that is funded by the German government to support the uptake of Gaia-X based federations and data ecosystems. And in order to build a data ecosystem, of course, this is a very technical exercise. So you will need a set of services and tools, we call them, to get started. And that, what exactly that entails, we will have a look at in a minute. But basically, GXFS has been, over the last years, developing a toolbox of free and open source software components that can support you if you are interested in building a Gaia-X compliant federated ecosystem for data and infrastructure. So now we just have to wait a second and we will be on the next slide. We always like to also include this slide, which has some key facts about our initiative. And that is, first of all, GXFS is not operated by any individual entity. It is really operated by the different ecosystems. In order to use GXFS components, the independent setup of a federation is required. That means we're not providing this centrally, but this is a decentralized offering of a toolbox that you can use in order to get started with Gaia-X ecosystems. And the role of the federator that I mentioned earlier is handling the operation of these software components that I mentioned before. And last but not least, it is really important to also understand what we're offering is a free and open source software toolbox. That means this toolbox is currently under the governance of the Eclipse Foundation. That is basically a place where open source projects can find a home and where a community is building around them in order to maintain this software code over the next years to come. Because as a funded project, of course, our lifetime, let's say, ends at the end of next year, but we know that software has to be updated continuously. And we have been working very hard on building an open source community to do just that. I'm not sure, but maybe someone has a question here already. I see. No? Okay, good. Then we can move on to the next slide. And as of now, Andreas Weiß, my colleague, will take over and will dive with you and us into the XFSC toolbox in a bit more detail.
Yeah, thank you very much, Vivian, and thank you very much for the audience to join this session. I'm the managing director of ECO Association, and yeah, we are
Not sure. Sorry, I'm not sure if I'm the only one, but Andreas, it's very hard to hear you. Very quiet.
That's weird. Can you hear me now?
A bit better, yes.
It's the right micro. So it worked before always. Hopefully you can hear me now. It's still too weak. Huh. I'm gonna switch off my video. Does it change anything right now? Can you hear me better?
No.
Then I have set up now. Is it better now?
Yeah, now it's better, I think.
Okay, let's take this micro. All right. So just to recap, I'm the managing director of ECO, and the reason why we are engaged in Gaia-X is, as Vivian already mentioned, that we're representing a majority of the cloud and infrastructure, internet infrastructure providers and service providers, which is mainly the lower part of the X, if you have ever seen this, because Gaia-X is intended to represent digital infrastructures and data ecosystems in a joint approach. So to harmonize the requirements, which is mainly leading not just into technical terms, but also into governance terms, like how to deal with data privacy, how to deal with security in distributed environments, and how to deal with data on a regulation level, and how to deal with AI at the end of the day, because this is one of the key purposes of Gaia-X, to make data available for treatment or management with AI services, either by foundation models or very specialized machine learning models. So, and this brings us also to one of your key areas, how to provide reasonable capacities and infrastructures to deal with AI services at the end of the day. So to bring it now into a more operational level, we thought you can build 1,000 tons of PowerPoints, but you need to bring it into a functional model. And this is more or less the cross-federation services components toolbox. We had to rename the toolbox against GXFS due to the fact that with Eclipse, they need to be the owner of the trademark. So Eclipse is now the host for this XFSC toolbox, and I want to give you some insights how to handle it and how to manage it. So I would like to get to the next slide, please. And with the Federation Services model, which has been already introduced by Vivian, I just want to highlight 4 key questions if you target such data ecosystems, which is really the sense to work on a eye level, as it has been already named, but that we have this, let me say, room for cooperation to work jointly together. And one of these corporations is, for example, Gaia-X, if you heard about it, out of the automotive industry, where you have a huge set of competitors like Volkswagen, Audi, Ford, and others, who are addressing jointly the challenge how to deal with carbon footprint monitoring, how to build supply chain resilience, how to provide transparency about products and components based on the product passport regulation, which has been introduced recently. All these things are such federations, or all these activities are federations where you need a joint approach to, for example, in this sense with Gaia-X, to address the 6,000 OEMs or nearly 300,000 manufacturers across over the world. They have to share their data to build up such models for, as I mentioned, like carbon footprint monitoring. But when you step into such a model, we have some very basic questions: who I'm dealing with on a legally base, because we also work based on joint governance, based on joint contracts. And therefore, we have this component level of identity and trust, or even more trust over IP, over Internet Protocol, because we are talking about decentralized services. And one of the key concepts are the SSI concepts, self-sovereign IDs, because when we talk about sovereignty and decentralized services, we don't want to add another central identity repository or Active Directory or whatever. And we need to offer a service concept which keeps the sovereignty of identities, but also supports the trust establishment over distributed systems. The next one is, when we know who I'm talking to, what is the service which is offered, which can be any kind of service. It can be a compute service, it can be an interconnection service, it can be a data service. So everything which is described as a service should be part of such catalogs where you can opt in for certain services, but you also get the transparency of the opted services, and you have capabilities to identify, for example, when you orchestrate a multitude of services within your ecosystem, what is about legal compliance, for example, what is about GDPR compliance. And then you need the capabilities to represent such orchestrated services in so-called knowledge graphs. And this is one of the technologies which is supported here. So it's not just a simple database, it's a RDF-based technology approach, and also the description of the services is accordingly with usage of JSON LD, for example. And then when you step into a data sharing option, which is different to the simple compute services, you might need to apply certain rules. For example, I'm offering the service, but just I want to negotiate mutually between the provider and the receiver of the data, for example, a certain time frame or a certain use case. So when it comes to data sovereignty services, yeah, we need to do much more than with the current compute commodity services in terms of agreements between the two parties, which also leads into contractual obligations. And then last but not least, everything has been set up, is in operation, but how can I check that everything is as negotiated, that the criteria which were used to get into this model are still valid? This is then the overall compliance package. So these are the 4 key pillars of the federation services, which are underlined with appropriate services to achieve these goals I just mentioned. Coming to the next slide, please. Yeah, and this is then the breakdown of the toolbox, and we talk about authentication authorization services, which support the SSI model, credential management for organization and also for individuals. Other term for credential manager might be a kind of wallet, if you heard about it, but we are really scoping on the credentials, which is not just on the identity, but also on verification, or let me say, evidences. For example, if someone is claiming for a service, it is operated in a ISO 27001 accredited or approved data center, then you need someone who issued this statement of compliance, and you need to verify the statement of compliance in a digital environment. And this is really where we think there's a huge advantage to deal with such verifiable credentials and verifiable presentations to advance the assessment capabilities and to make it easier also from the economy of scale. This is then combined with trust services, where you can also put additional rules, whom to trust based on which claim, and also who is allowed to get more disclosed information about my services. Contracting services, as I mentioned, to deal with individual data agreements, and also which leads them to exchange logging, that you can provide evidences that such transactions happened, which is also a question for how to incentivize data exchanges. Then we have a workflow engine, or we will enhance it now to scenario engine to build in a low-code platform such scenarios, also with UI services. We have continuous automated monitoring, which is very close to the idea of EUCS by ENISA about the cloud certification scheme. We are working closely with other EU projects like Medina and are introducing services to monitor the correctness of claims from outside to certain cloud and data services. Notarization services related to issue verification statements of claims, and then, as I mentioned, the catalog. We have a demo portal, and we are also dealing with orchestration functions based on Terraform and Tosca and other technologies which are well known in the cloud native environment. Going to the next slide, please. Yeah, this is a more breakdown. I don't want to recap everything. You will get the slides further on. But as I said, you have this identity and trust level based on SSI principles, mainly out of W3C specifications, which is, of course, a huge paradigm change for most of the companies to deal with decentralized identities and to support the sovereignty claim behind it. But this is really mandated now for Gaia-X ecosystems to work towards these principles. Coming to the next slide. The catalog, which is, of course, directly related to so-called self-descriptions or self-declarations of services. You might imagine that a service, a complex service, might have more than thousands of attributes to be exposed, but just a few of them are then relevant to be supported by verification statements, best case by third parties who are trusted. And this is the overall ecosystem. So any service who claims I'm GDPR compliant, right now it would be good to have a kind of statement by a code of conduct entity. Yeah, it has been approved and attested that this is GDPR compliant according to Article 28, I think. But then we are also targeting in the future real certification schemes according to Article 42 to be embedded here. And all the self-descriptions with the claims deposited in the wallets will be then related to the catalog, which is a kind of index service to find services, to opt in for services, to maintain them, to bring them in the community, which means each federation has the self-determination to decide which services should be part of our catalog and which can be opted by other federations or data spaces to be used in the context of the use cases of the federation goals. So this is more how we think we can bring these pillars together into an overall functional model based on federation services. Coming to the next slide, please. As I mentioned, data contracting service is really important. We are supporting so-called Ricardian contracts, which are human readable, but at the same time also machine readable. You know, there are still pending decisions how to deal with smart contracts in the future and what is a baseline. But I can also mention that as part of our identity services, we are getting connected with the EUDI initiative by the European Union, which is related to eIDAS regulation. Of course, we want to keep it open, so any other identification mechanism which is used beyond Europe should also be supported. We are more looking on this level of interoperability, and it's more an individual decision what kind of justification or evidence I need to step into a certain contract mode with certain parties. I think this is more on the user side to make such decisions as part of their compliance negotiation. Coming to the last slide here on the services is compliance. As I mentioned, it is, for example, also of relevance to have a dedicated onboarding workflow, really to identify, to know to whom I'm talking, are all the verification statements in place, where is the headquarter located, because this might have impact on the regulation assessment, and all these things. So these are more support services for onboarding, but we can extend it also to more in-depth services, for example, label assessment and all these things. It's quite smart. Probably we can step into such exercise, or you visit our workshops to get more insights on these services. Then the continuous automated monitoring and the notarization services, they are clearly related to the compliance aspect, and they are functional and they can be used as open source. And then, of course, they are aligned with the other components as well. Next slide, please. Yeah, Portal is more just a showcase, and we are working on several scenarios, but you can also look at Gaia-X or Gaia-X. They have already portals in place, which are showing really the purpose of a federation, how they organize themselves. There is a set of documentations, how to get onboarded and all these things. Yeah, and we are really getting more into this mode of a mesh service approach of cloud computing and data services, which introduces this level of complexity, how to deal with orchestration of services, instantiation, deployment, and how to get hold of services within such a complex service network, from the edge service where the data are produced on the shop floor, up to the data storage services, up to the compute services, and all other activities which are of relevance here. Coming to the next slide, please. Yeah, and we are now targeting our phase 2 of implementation with a key of main objectives to enhance the architectural concept, adapt existing services to the general technology developments. As you probably know, out of W3C, it's pretty agile. We are at the leading edge with the specifications, which also require some refinement, and also take conceptual requirements and changes from the Gaia-X community into account. One of these samples is, for example, that we are introducing a personal credential management, not just on smartphone, but also in the cloud and as a web browser plugin. Also to introduce a consent manager between individuals, and this relation between a patient and the doctor, that I'm going to allow him to get hold of my data I got out of the MRT, for example. So these are the fancy details we would like to support with the components. Everything is captured in the Eclipse code repository. You can have a look at the changes and extensions. We have a set of assigned contracted parties who are going to contribute in this open source code based on the tender mechanism in these various activities. And we will do more also in the catalog area and the contracting service. Next slide, please. And now I would like to hand over to Hauke, that he gives you a more catchy idea about federation services in practice. Thank you for your attention.
Yeah, thanks, Andreas. Maybe we to the next slide. Yeah, this is one of our projects that we started in 2019, an AI-based service ecosystem for service technicians, or as we call it in Alexa for the blue-collar worker, or for service technicians. And I think in the concept phase, at the same time the Gaia-X project started. So if we would have known what was going to be available and with Gaia-X, maybe we could have integrated this into the concept, but we started it kind of parallel. And this project was also founded by the Federal Ministry of Economics and Climate Action. And yeah, basically we started with a project that was taking place in the industry sector, industrial production, and especially in the service area of these companies. Next slide. We basically in 2020 started with 6 different speed projects. There were basically use cases where one a company from the industry sector was working together with an expert in the data science or AI sector, and they both developed really practical applications of AI in different use cases, which I'm going to go to in a little bit. And basically, we kind of developed leading edge innovations in these different use cases. And in the next step, we try to kind of generate some generic AI-based services and business models from these use cases in 2021, and concepts and templates. So other SMEs and other players from the industry could participate or also benefit from what we were doing in this project. And now in this year and the last year, we kind of developed an ecosystem around these services. They are basically 12 AI services that were derived from these different use cases, and that can now be actually used by third parties also, and not only by these the companies that apply these services, but also by from others. Next slide. So this is basically the playing field. 100% digital service life cycle, and all kinds of different AI applications that can where companies or organizations can benefit in their field service, where you could, for example, use it for predictive analysis, or also to generate AI-based reports, and use a chatbot to support your service technicians. And this is basically the something that was one of the findings that we can really use different AI applications in most of the sectors of this digital service lifecycle. Next slide. Yeah, one of the applications that is using also some technology that was developed actually for the medical sectors, for doctors, to support doctors when they do their the diagnosis for patients. And we use the NLP service application, like as a natural language processing for this. And as there are always symptoms and some kind of diagnosis that a doctor is doing, we could also do transfer this to machines. So this technology from the medical sector could be used in the industrial production facilities as well for machines. So there's one very interesting transfer of research that we did in the project, and that can be successfully applied now to machines. The next slide. Yeah, and these are the 6 use cases. They come from really different domains, and for example, wastewater management. We have an anomaly detection, or Word, which is supplying small and medium enterprises with power tools like power drills, or these kind of things, and they all connected now, and they collect data from these power tools and can analyze this data, and even in the future these power tools will even speak to the person that's using them, and maybe tell them this might be the wrong drill for this wall you're trying to put a hole in, and these kind of things. And it's pretty interesting for them to use this data that they gather in these with their different machines, even for the production of the machines. And yeah, these From all these different use cases, we derived 12 AI services. Next slide. And as you've seen, this digital life cycle was the basis, and then we have these 12 AI tools that can now be used by other companies, and then they can be accessed through a catalog that we created in the project. And then the next step for us was also using the Gaia-X ecosystem, and especially the federated catalog to also make these two of the AI services available through this federated catalog. So we built our own Service Meister portal. It's like not as big as a portal that as my colleague Andreas was presenting with Catena-X or others, but it's a good demonstration of how actually these AI applications, next slide, can be used. This is just the example of AutoTim, which is an anomaly detection AI based that you can now is now made available through the Gaia-X catalog, and here you can actually use a data set that is provided here, and the services every time it's used, it's verified, and you can actually use these data sets which are provided here, but also your own data sets to detect anomalies in these data sets, and you can even pay for this service, and also book the compute resources that are necessary to apply these services to the data that you want to use for the analysis, and at the end we will be provided a PDF document with a thorough analysis of your data. And at the end, there's also a payment process where you can actually pay for the services. So that's basically for the company Innovex that's providing the service. It's a new business model also to use their, or how to actually make their services available to a much broader a number of users, and for them it's the first time they use Gaia-X or provide their services like this, and we are very excited to see how this is going to develop for them, and which will be actually how many users they can gather with these services, and how many people will use it at the end. And yeah, next slide. So our project basically is now going to the next step. We've built a very strong partner network, and now we're on the doing the next step into a broader perspective of using AI and with really practical daily life applications. And we are founding a new initiative, and everybody who's interested in this initiative can contact me or my colleagues, and we can invite you to the next meetings that will take part in Cologne. And we're happy to invite you to see you there if you're interested. And on the next slide, you will find my contact details for LinkedIn. And thank you very much for your attention. And we have other very interesting projects like Auto Workshop and Liam and other things which might be also interested. So feel free to contact me. And now back to Vivian, I think. Huh?
Thanks, Hauke. Yeah, I think this concludes basically the formal part of our presentation, but and I think we're with around 40 minutes. I think that was exactly what Miriam told us, but that should also include discussion